Wolverine and the X-Men number 28 continues the students' trip to the Savage Land. Wolverine's brother Dog has hijacked the field trip and has the students fighting not only him, but time-traveling robots and cowboys. With things spinning out of control, the students begin to bicker. Fortunately, Eyeboy seems to realize the extent of his powers and uses a pair of guns to alleviate the situation. With the robots and cowboys defeated, Dog turns his attention to the students. He attempts to intimidate them, explaining that he is better than Wolverine. He is the better Logan. However, Dog realizes that the students won't be pushed around. They aren't afraid of him. He sees them standing tall together, like X-Men. Wolverine then shows up and tells the kids to stand down. His brother is his problem. Suddenly, one of the enemy gunmen shoots at Dog, but Quentin Quire uses his powers to stop the bullet and save his life. Unable to bear the shame of his weakness, Dog portals away. With the field trip ending, Wolverine tells the students that they all passed his test. They will remain students at the Jean Grey School. Glob Herman is the one student who did not pass. He ran away during the fight so he could rendezvous with the Hellfire Club and join their Hellfire Academy. Wolverine and the students are left to fly back to Westchester on their Blackbird and reflect on what they've learned.
So the field trip comes to an end here, and the point of the field trip when we started off was to really allow these new mutants to grow and really become X-Men. Do you think that happened?
It definitely happens. My favorite moment in this issue was when Dog looked at the X-Men and said, I expected them to be weak and hopeless, but they all stood there together, and for a second they looked like X-Men.
I liked it in that moment where Evan gets sort of this glint in his eye, and he looks like such a badass, like a real leader.
Kind of like Cyclops when he's got that like little glint in his visor, and
Yeah.
you know the X-Men have won.
And I agree completely. The field trip, I think, was a resounding success. And even though Wolverine seems to be really down on himself in the end, he sort of indicates that, man, I'm really kind of a failure. We Logans are not really much teachers, but I really think that he did a good job at teaching them.
I can sort of agree, but I mean, it wasn't like his general lesson plan to have, Dog show up and like kidnap these students and, them to be thrown in this life-threatening situation. So
I don't think that was the planned part, but the important thing you can take away from Wolverine's teaching is that in the trip over, he gives each one of them sort of this personal talk that they all reflect on in these past two issues that sort of helps them get through this moment. And I feel that's what a teacher is.
I can agree with that. And all the characters did seem to grow. I mean, they're not done growing yet, but at least they're X-Men now.
But let's take a look at the other students and how they changed. Does anyone stick out to your mind specifically?
Eyeboy is the first one that comes to mind. He seemed like one of the dumbest New Mutants, but Jason Aaron just made the guy such a badass. Like, he even gave him a badass moment where he's got like 2 guns.
I wonder just having all those eyes makes him a better marksman, and
Well, he saw the future. He went like Neo on them. We also saw Bruce show a little bit of like cognitive ability. Wolverine on the plane told him where the pickup point would be, and he actually remembered, so that's sort of progress.
I think that's actually pretty big progress, and I think it's really cool Wolverine to tell. He's the only one that he told, so it's basically like everyone really had to count on Brew to get to that location, and I think that's Wolverine, once again, being sort of a good teacher, sort of trying to take that leap of faith and saying that I know you're inside, that you have the capability to do this, and he's sort of giving him the tools needed to do it.
Quentin Quire is another obvious person we got to talk about. In some of the previous issues, we saw him try to step up and be the leader, like when he's elected school president a couple issues ago. But in this issue specifically, he has the opportunity to let Dog get shot in the face, but he actually uses his telepathic abilities to stop the bullet.
I think that's important, not from a leadership standpoint, but more of a moral standpoint.
Right.
Because Kid Omega hasn't always come across as morally upright.
He started Schism because he started like a riot in the UN General Assembly.
Exactly. And so that, I think, is probably the biggest growth that could have happened for him, and I liked it. So I mentioned before, Wolverine really grew as a teacher, even though he really doesn't think it, and I think it really solidifies his position as a headmaster, at least a worthy one.
I completely agree, and I think that's important, not just in the scope of Wolverine and the X-Men, but kind of the X-Men universe in general. Post-AVX and also kind of post-Schism, they've presented these two sides where Cyclops is now one side of the X-Men and Wolverine is now the other. And I felt over the past few years that this didn't seem very solid. Both of their positions seemed very shaky. I'd always kind of say, like, oh, they can always fall back to Xavier being one side and Magneto being the other. But I feel like recently in the X-Men universe, it's Cyclops has solidified his place as this mutant revolutionary. And especially in this arc, Wolverine has solidified his place as kind of the successor to Xavier, the mutant headmaster.
I think in the X-Men universe, it's very important to maintain the issue of gray areas, morality, what's right, what's wrong, and it's always good to have two sides, two places for presumably the good moral X-Men to go towards, and they both have their pros and cons to them. And so having this dichotomy of Scott on one side and Wolverine on the other, I think is very good for just X-Men comics in general, and it's led to some really good storylines, not just in Wolverine and the X-Men, but All New X-Men has been great, and Uncanny X-Men, which has also been great.
Yeah, I really feel like recently the X-Men universe has moved into an era beyond Xavier and Magneto's era. This is now the era definitively of Wolverine and Cyclops.
So as a grade for Wolverine the X-Men issue number 28, what would you give it?
I'm going to give this issue a 4 out of 5. It really wrapped up the arc very nicely. Everything Jason Aaron did here was very solid, so I'll give it a 4 out of 5.
I'd actually give this issue a 3.5 out of 5. It did do a very solid job of wrapping up the arc, though I wasn't too fond of the arc in general just because Dog's interference in the whole thing sort of seemed random to me. Though I did like Dog's backstory and the growth that the kids had, it seemed kind of hodgepodge.
So thanks for watching B3 Comics review of Wolverine and the X-Men number 28. Before we go, we got a question for you guys.
So who benefited the most from this trip to the Savage Land, and why?
Leave your answer below in the comments, and thanks for watching.